So can you talk about the peanut allergy problem?
Well, here's a good example of a recommendation that the establishment put out with such absolutism when really they just made it up. And that was, in order to prevent peanut allergies, mothers who are pregnant or lactating, any child 0 through 3 years of old should avoid peanuts 100%, peanut butter in particular. Peanuts have a choking hazard, so we're talking about peanut butter. It had been done for a long time that you would give an infant at 5 or 6 months, as soon as they can eat, a little bit of peanut butter, maybe a little milk, eggs, and that would that was kind of a standard. In Africa, they would add a little peanut to the soup that they would drink. So
you start to get them used to it.
Yeah, their immune system learns it and they tolerate it. It's called immune tolerance. But in their hubris, the American Academy of Pediatrics had this committee, and they said total peanut abstinence in the first 3 years of life in order to prevent peanut allergies. They had it perfectly backwards. It ignited the modern day peanut allergy epidemic. A few years into that recommendation, the peanut allergy rates soared. And the establishment started freaking out and thinking, what's going on here, And they concluded, anti-science mothers are not following our recommendation. We need to double down and increase compliance. And then they skyrocketed, and we saw a new type of peanut allergy, which is the ultra-severe anaphylactic reaction showing up. A kid can be near a peanut or peanut butter and have trouble breathing. That's a real thing. We shouldn't mock it. This is, by and large, an epidemic that was ignited by this hubris. And then everyone played along, the bandwagon thinking, the group thinking medicine, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, NIAID. They played along. They sort of firmed up the recommendations, supported it. 15 years later, just 8 years ago, the study finally got published, a basic, simple study randomizing kids to the two approaches: early peanut butter exposure, age 5 months, 6 months, versus abstinence. And there was a massive difference within a few years. Massive, 8-fold. Why not do that study initially?
Yeah, right.
Instead of just rule by opinion. And this is where we get ourselves in huge trouble.
Well, this is what I love about the book, because on this, and I think on HRT as well, and on some others, you went back, found the original alleged study on which these massive policy implementations were based, and found the doctor who was behind the study. And in multiple instances, they were like, either that's not what I said, or we're so dodgy as to, you instantly recognize this is not an honest broker. So the book lays these people bare. HRT was another one, hormone replacement therapy for women, where everybody's getting it. Women loved it in their 50s and whatever. And then they said, it causes cancer. Shouldn't do it. You're going to get breast cancer. And only recently, and we've covered this on the show, did they say, that's actually not true. You might be able to take HRT with absolutely no problem. Talk to your doctor, see what your breast cancer risks are, but it's a minuscule risk to the increased breast cancer.
There's actually zero increased risk of breast cancer mortality in the original study, and no one did the investigative journalism to actually look closely at the study. And I found the guy who made the announcement 22 years ago declaring that hormone replacement during menopause causes breast cancer, and he was talking over my head and trying to talk statistics, and it was a very interesting, long conversation. And he was talking to the wrong dude. I have a degree in epidemiology and biostatistics from Harvard. And so we talked the numbers, and he acknowledged to me after we stuck to the actual data that there was no statistically significant increased risk of breast cancer or breast cancer mortality. Women who took estrogen alone had a 25% lower rate of breast cancer. And yet 50 million women have been denied this amazing therapy that helps them live longer and feel better because of this dogma put out by this one doctor from the NIH who hoodwinked many of his co-investigators in a meeting just before his press conference where he said, hey, we're going to do this. I'm going to make this announcement. And I find out there's a shouting match that happened in that meeting in 2002. They said, you can't put this out there. It's not statistically significant. And if you scare women with fear of breast cancer, with something as sensitive as breast cancer, you will never be able to put that genie back in the bottle.
And that was really true.
80% of doctors today still will not prescribe hormone therapy or try to minimize the amount of prescribing because they will tell you that it causes breast cancer. And when you ask them why, they will point to the 2002 Women's Health Initiative that was announced by this doctor without releasing his data until later after the media ran with the headlines. And just for context, Megyn, arguably with the exception of antibiotics, there is no medication that improves the health of a population more than hormone replacement therapy for menopausal women taking estrogen or estrogen plus. They live on average 3.5 years longer in the group that took it. Their nitric oxide levels are higher because the estradiol oxidizes. So their blood vessels are a little softer, more dilated, more healthy, improves the blood flow. It's also believed to help with nerve conduction. That's why it may be that many researchers have observed 50 to 60% less cognitive decline in women who start hormone therapy.
And on top of it, it helps you sleep better, and greater sleep is better to prevent Alzheimer's and all those things.
Yeah, 35% lower risk of Alzheimer's in one of the big studies. The short-term symptoms of menopause that last, say, 5 to 8 years are either eliminated or alleviated in part from, so there's less suffering, less mood swings, less weight gain, less
bone breakage later.
A 30% lower rate of breaking a bone, 50% in some studies. So if a woman falls later in life, they're far less likely to need surgery or have a broken bone. My mom just broke her hand and just about a year ago. She's fine now, but she was never given hormone therapy. The fracture was borderline if it needed surgery, but the colleagues I trust at Hopkins said she should really have surgery. Had this guy never made this false claim, misrepresented his data, I got to wonder, could my mother have avoided all the immobility and cascade of events?
That's amazing.
So women feel better, live longer.
Not to mention, we had a doctor on the show, not this past summer, but 23, who was saying it can help with sex drive because as your estrogen goes down, and if you get it just back to normal, for women, it can, I don't want to say it's a miracle drug, but it's kind of a miracle cocktail.
It's pretty amazing. Less dryness is true. And a 50% lower rate of heart attacks in one study because the blood vessels may be healthier.
That's incredible.
And to this day, this NIH scientist created this dogma that resulted in one of the greatest screw-ups of modern medicine. And it's still going on. That's why I wanted people to know about this, and that's why I write about it in the book.
Can you speak about the microbiome? Because there's a woman named Dr. Robin Chutkin who came on my show at NBC a couple of times. She was great. She has whole books about the microbiome
she's great.
With recipes, and I recommend just Google. They're out there. We eat from that book all the time. But here's the problem with the microbiome as I see it. The system around us does not support us, cultivating a healthy microbiome. And I know you're big on caution about antibiotics, but they're prescribed for everything. I mean, I'll just give you an example. I just went to the eye doctor. I have dry eye. And she's like, your eyes are a little inflamed right now, and we should be doing 50 milligrams of doxycycline a day because it'll bring the inflammation of the eyelids down. And that's good for me because it's very uncomfortable to have inflamed eyes, especially in this job. But back on antibiotics, 30 days. It happens all the time. They push them on you.
They push them in. Also, there's a consumerist culture now. Doctors are getting rated with a 5-star rating, and some of the parents are coming in demanding antibiotics for their kids. There's many factors going on here, but we have to be disciplined as a medical profession and say, if you're not going to benefit, if it's a viral infection, we have to stop screwing up the microbiome by carpet bombing the microbiome with these antibiotics. Remember, the microbiome is a lining of millions of different bacteria along the GI tract that are involved in absorption and digestion. It trains the immune system that's in close proximity in the wall of the intestine. Some of those bacteria produce serotonin involved in mood and maybe mental illness. And some of those bacteria make GLP-1. Now,
that's the Ozempic.
The Ozempic active ingredient.
So that your microbiome makes your own Ozempic.
At low levels, yeah. Okay. It's a natural hormone in the body. So 60% of antibiotics in many studies are unnecessary that are prescribed. I think it's much higher. I'm forced to give antibiotics or have been much of my career for minor procedures because there's a protocol, even though the data really supports antibiotics for major procedures, not minor. But it's just kind of, what the heck? There's this myth that, they won't hurt you. They're probably altering the microbiome. Good animal studies show that. I go through it in my book with the world expert on the microbiome. And an amazing study just came out of the Mayo Clinic that is in one of the giant blind spots of modern medicine that no one I know in medicine had noticed this study. It was brought to my attention by a friend. The Mayo Clinic looked at 14,000 kids and compared those who had an antibiotic in the first couple years of life.
This is a scary part of the book, yeah.
It's amazing, right? Because the average 3-year-old has already taken about an antibiotic course each year.
Wow.
Right? So think about its effect in altering the microbiome. They compare, and by the way, antibiotics save lives, C-sections save lives, but they're both overused, and people need to have good, judicious understandings of these things. The kids who took an antibiotic in the first couple years of life compared to kids who did not had a 20% higher rate of obesity, 21% higher rate of learning disabilities, all of which are on the rise in the modern era of antibiotics, 32% higher rate of attention deficit disorder, 90% higher rate of asthma, and nearly a 300% higher rate of celiac. All of these things are going up, and we scratch our heads in medicine and say, I don't know why, it's genetic or you're smoking or you're obese. No, it's the underlying disruption of the microbiome, and it's not just antibiotics. And by the way, in that study, the more courses of antibiotics, the greater the risk of each of those chronic diseases.
But what about something like, I know we're not doing specifics, but think about, strep. You get strep. Yeah. And I remember when my kids were little, they'd say, if you don't treat strep, it can cause a heart infection that will saddle your child for life. So it was like, oh my God, get the penicillin stat.
Yeah, you truly have a bacterial infection. You want to treat it early, get ahead of it. These infections can cause real problems. We don't want people listening to let a kid suffer with a bacterial infection because that can cause hearing loss, affect their learning and their long-term hearing. But most antibiotics are given for these nothing viral,
or just
minor,
prophylactically,
people demanding them. So we've got to stop doing that.
Do you owe back taxes or have unfiled returns? Along with hiring tens of thousands of new agents and field officers, the IRS has been sending over 5 million pay-up letters to those who have unfiled tax returns or balances owed. Don't waive your rights and speak with these guys on your own. Instead, Tax Network USA, a trusted tax relief firm, has saved more than $1 billion in back taxes for their clients, and they might help to secure you the best deal possible. Whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million, they can help you. Whether it's business or personal taxes, even if you have the means to pay, or if you're on a fixed income, they can help you. Finally resolve your tax burdens once and for all. Call these guys at 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Megyn. Don't let the IRS control your life. Empower yourself with Tax Network USA's support and take charge of your financial future. tnusa.com/MEGYN. Visit there today. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.